everyone. I'm Katie Mahalic, and today we're here talking with Emily Dinova about her new book, VEIL of Seduction. Hi, Emily.
Hey, Katie, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to talk to you about being a writer, especially about your new book. And the first question I wanted to know is what inspired you to write this book?
Oh my gosh, so many things. Basically, I had run across an article back when Roosevelt Island was Blackwell Island. And there was a story of a reporter who had gone undercover into a woman's insane asylum and in order to expose what was going on there and what was happening and the conditions and all of these things.
Nellie
So
Bly.
yes, exactly. And I think there was actually a movie made about her stories. The book she released or the paper she released was called 10 Days in a Madhouse. And that was kind of my jumping off point. Another really key inspiration was actually a conversation that I had with my therapist in regards to toxic relationships, narcissism as like a personality disorder, and then kind of trying to connect this idea of mental health to the mythology of certain creatures. So
Excellent. I love it. I know a lot about Nellie Bly. I've researched her for a long time. I find her really inspirational. How much do you feel the character is based on Nellie Bly?
it's not her. My character is a little less she's not as sure as herself. She's sort of just starting out. I don't think she's as brave. I think she's perhaps more reckless in a lot of ways, as she doesn't have a sort of connection to the outside world to pull her back. She sort of is on a whim. Again, she's young, she's kind of impressionable. And that was lending itself to what I was trying to accomplish with, this idea of a young woman and a whirlwind of, romance and mystery and mystique. And so, no, I don't think she is quite as fantastically aware and, strong as Nellie. But I think she eventually gets there. And I think the decisions that she has to make for the greater good are what propels her to that level. So I actually never thought about it like that. But yeah, I'm sure there is certainly some inspiration in there.
What other kind of research did you do for this project, for this book?
I did a lot of research. The world is set that the story is set in 1922 in Newport, Rhode Island. So I really wanted to understand the world that I was diving into. I also wanted to understand the time period in general. So I was looking into what was happening in the country politically at that time, economically, socially, how women were viewed, what the status quo was for mental health, even more so what the dichotomy was between the rich and the poor at that time in terms of even mental health, the architecture in Newport, Rhode Island, what was going on there, sort of everything. I really wanted to understand the world as best that I could in the time period. And of course, because my piece centers my protagonist is a woman, and she's a very forward thinking woman, and an investigative journalist, I really wanted to grasp, the understanding of what that was like in that time or what it would have been like. And so I really wanted to keep a nice authenticity throughout. So my research was extensive, and I actually didn't realize how extensive it was until I looked back through. I also mentioned that there were some mythological things within the work. So I was getting into, old mythology and symbols and, language. Even, I did research for all my characters' names. I wanted everything to have a meaning. I felt very strongly about that while I was writing. So it all kind of trickled back down into my subconscious. And when I unearthed my notes today, I was like, oh, wow, I did more research than I thought.
And I think that's really interesting that some of your inspiration came from, even conversations with your therapist, which leads me to my next question, which is, can you tell me a little bit more about yourself as a writer and how you became a writer?
Sure. So I have always been a creative person. I'm an actor and a producer and a director as well. Writing has always been a form of catharsis for me. I've just always enjoyed getting my thoughts out onto paper and leaving reality for a stint. And so, yeah, I just decided one day that I wanted to challenge myself and move from plays and screenplays and poetry into, long form and conquer the novel. So that's kind of how this came about. I also am currently in school. I recently went back to school to get a licensure in psychoanalysis. So mental health has always been a super interesting point for me. And if you read some of my other stuff, it is a through point, throughout my writing has always been kind of rooted in that. So my thoughts have always been connecting art and mental health. And so that has been a lot of inspiration for my work as well.
I'm curious in regards to the themes of your book. It sounds like mental health continues to be a theme. What other themes are inside this story in particular?
So another really contentious point for me, I think the thing that I really wanted to hammer home was what I kind of mentioned earlier was toxic relationships, right? How we view romance, how we view love, how that has been injected into our society throughout this bad boy trope, like the longevity of historical romance and how that has affected and shaped women's perceptions of relationships and of what these sort of situations occur and how they affect people's health. So I really wanted to play with that concept. My novel, I suppose, is a bit deceiving in a way. But I think it's really important for women to have another perspective outside of this, these relationships that are all consuming and romantic and seem very intense. And I think that has been so shoved down our throats in society. And I actually wrote a blog article about it called "Are We Done Romanticizing the Bad Boy Trope?" And kind of following the through line of history and if this has always existed, if we've ever needed it, how it's benefited us, why it's this way. And that was another thing I really wanted to explore and kind of flip on its head, because I feel like there's just too much of it and not enough explanation as to why it exists and what we actually use it for.
So this brings me to my next question. How personal is this story for you?
I was previously in an extremely abusive relationship, which was one of the things. I wouldn't say it was the main thing, but it was certainly part of my reason for entering into therapy, seeking help, trying to better understand my own behavior and my actions, to why I ended up in this situation. I got curious. And I think that's, that curiosity led me to continue my research and my understanding and eventually inspired this work.
So hearing all of that, it makes me wonder, when a reader, especially a woman or someone that identifies with the female protagonist in this story, do you feel like it gives the reader an opportunity to kind of find a way to move past um, society's idea of this bad boy trope kind of being the all alluring, entity for these romance stories?
I don't know if it necessarily gives them the tools or the insight to move past it, but I think it gives them the ability to, or the opportunity to become aware of it. That you can be tricked. And my book, I don't want to give too much away, but it kind of, it plays with you in a way that, someone of the nature of my character, my other characters, some of them would happen in real life. So I've had a few people who have read it or read versions as I was going through the process, who were very upset with me of feeling like I duped them in some way. And that was kind of the effect that I was going for.
Okay. So Where do you get your inspiration for stories, for new stories?
Uh,
You have new stories coming up.
I always have a story somewhere. A lot of my inspiration comes from travel and spontaneous experience, honestly. Allowing myself to wander. I feel like, you never know what you're going to observe, what you're going to hear that's going to incite some idea or process. But travel is a big one. I love to explore.
You definitely seem like an explorer of the world. What are your writing habits, your writing rituals?
My rituals. They used to be whiskey and cigarettes. Now it's herbal tea. I usually have some sort of instrumental music on that I like to, whatever kind of fits the mood of what I'm writing. I prefer to be alone completely. Time of day, again, it really depends on what I'm writing, or if like something strikes me. I never try to give myself like a time limit or be like, I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna write till then. Like that's never really how I work. It's usually I just have to get to a point where it's settled in me, and then I'm like, okay, I'm good. Um, so that's usually my process.
So that brings me to two different questions. One, do you find the life as a writer lonely?
My partner's also a writer, so we actually that's what we did during quarantine. We both wrote a novel, and I sat on one side of the room, and he sat on the other, and it was we were together in our loneliness. Yeah, no, I don't. I guess that's also because I pursue other artistic endeavors as well. I'm a professional actor, so it's kind of like nice having the balance of being around people and doing that and letting all of the out taking all of the outward and bringing it in, and then coming home and writing and taking all of the inward and putting it out. So it's kind of a nice balance for me.
That's really lucky that you have a partner that you can collaborate with, I think, or like that can understand you when you're kind of in your own world, in your own zone. And it makes me, wonder or want to ask the question, do you feel like being a writer is a blessing or a curse?
Both. Both. Sometimes I write something. Well, I mean, as a writer, you're always questioning, you're always saying, is this good enough? Is this what I'm trying to say coming across? It's euphoric in a sense when you feel like you've really got something, or you read back a paragraph and you're like, I didn't write that. That's so good. That couldn't have been. But it's also it's back and forth even through the whole editing process with this. I was like, this is horrible. I can't publish this. And then I'm like, oh, this part's really good, and so I think it's a blessing and a curse. It's a calling more than anything. I think if you have it in you, if you have a story to write, even if you think it's not important or it doesn't matter, still just write it, because at the end of the day, I feel like art is a vehicle for social change. It's there to help others, and if you can affect one person with your writing and help someone in any way, then I say go for it.
So, Emily, after all is said and done, what little morsel of advice would you give other writers?
Morsel. It's never just a morsel, Katie.
No, it never is.
I like to take Stephen King's advice that if you don't have the time and tools to read, you don't have the time and tools to write. So if you're not writing, you should be reading. And if you're not reading, you should be writing. That's really important. Always be honing your craft, always be filling yourself with knowledge, trying to absorb as much, both good and bad, that you can. I would also say that it's really important to just put it out there. If you have a story, if you have something you want to say, even if, it takes years to publish it, or you're not ready to publish it, you never know when your story might just be the thing someone needed to read. And writing has always been for me a vehicle of social change and how we can improve the world and help others. So, and to escape, from reality. If you're interested in doing that, I highly recommend writing a novel.
Emily, thank you so much for speaking with us today. Look for Emily Dinova's new book, Veil of Seduction, at henrygraypublishing.com or ask for it at your neighborhood bookstore. Until next time, happy reading.